Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy provides one of the most powerful frameworks for the ethical refutation of supremacy. At the center of Kantian ethics is the categorical imperative, which Kant formulated in several equivalent ways. The most directly relevant formulation is what he called the formula of humanity. Act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only. Supremacy violates this formula systematically and structurally. It does not merely treat members of the deemed inferior group as means on occasional particular occasions. It builds into its foundational logic the treatment of entire categories of human beings as instruments for others' ends, as labor, as territory, as subjects, as problems to be managed. The formula of humanity applies without exception. Humanity in Kant's formulation is not a term for a subset of people, but for all rational beings capable of setting their own ends. To declare that some human beings possess less inherent worth than others is to declare them less than full members of the moral community, to strip them of the status of ends in themselves. Kant's grounding of this principle is important. Rational nature, the capacity to set ends, to reason, to deliberate, is the source of moral worth. This capacity is not distributed along the lines of any racial, ethnic, or national categorization. Every human being who can ask, "What should I do?" is a bearer of rational nature. Supremacy attempts to override this with contingent features of birth, but no contingent feature can override the metaphysical status that rational nature confers. Kant's first formulation of the categorical imperative, to act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law, applies devastating force to supremacy when we examine precisely what maxim is at work. The supremacist's maxim, stated honestly, is this: I will treat members of my group with full moral consideration and members of other groups with diminished or no moral consideration on the basis of their group membership. Can this be universalized? No, because from the perspective of the other group, the maxim translates into, members of my group are to be treated with diminished moral consideration. No rational person can coherently will this as a universal law, because it would require them to consent in advance to their own degradation should they happen to be a member of the designated inferior group. The maxim is self-undermining when universalized. It is acceptable only to those who are already certain they occupy the privileged position, and that certainty is itself a form of circular reasoning that we have already seen fails. More precisely, a world in which the principle that some groups of humans inherently matter less is universally adopted is a world of perpetual, irresolvable, violent conflict between competing claims of superiority. It is a world that no rational person would will into existence. The very structure of rational willing excludes supremacy. The utilitarian tradition, from Jeremy Bentham through John Stuart Mill and Peter Singer, provides an independent and equally powerful refutation. Bentham's foundational principle that the morally relevant criterion is the capacity for suffering and enjoyment rather than any other feature explicitly excludes the kind of ranking that supremacy requires. His famous formulation asks not whether a being can reason or talk, but whether it can suffer. This is a deliberate challenge to hierarchies of intelligence, communication, or civilization. What matters morally is sentience, the capacity to experience pain and pleasure, and this capacity does not vary by race, ethnicity, or nationality. The historical record of supremacist regimes is an empirical test of the utilitarian calculus, and the verdict is unambiguous. Colonialism, apartheid, the Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade. These are not edge cases, but the systematic, predictable consequences of supremacist doctrine applied at scale. The suffering produced was not an accident or a misapplication of supremacist principles. It followed directly from them. When doctrine holds that certain people matter less, the treatment of those people as mattering less is the logical application of the doctrine. The utilitarian ledger does not balance. Peter Singer's extension of this argument in the expanding circle demonstrates that the historical arc of moral progress has consisted precisely in the expansion of the circle of moral concern, from kin to tribe, to nation, to all of humanity. Each expansion has required overcoming a version of supremacist logic that said the beings outside the circle did not fully count. The abolition of slavery, the recognition of women's full personhood, the criminalization of genocide, each represents a victory over some form of supremacy. The moral trajectory of human civilization is a sustained rejection of supremacist doctrine. John Rawls's contractarian framework provides another powerful refutation. Rawls asks us to imagine the original position, a thought experiment in which persons design the basic principles of their society from behind a veil of ignorance, not knowing what their own position in that society will be, their race, sex, class, natural talents, or conception of the good. From this position, no rational person would choose a society organized around supremacy, because they might turn out to be a member of the group designated as inferior. This is not merely a procedural point. It reveals something deep about the nature of supremacist principles. They are principles that only make sense to hold if you already know you are and will remain in the privileged position. They are not genuine principles of justice at all. They are expressions of accumulated advantage dressed up as principles. Genuine principles of justice must be ones that could be chosen by anyone, not ones that require knowledge of one's own privileged position to seem attractive. Furthermore, Rawls argues that rational agents behind the veil of ignorance would choose the difference principle, that inequalities are only justified when they benefit the least advantaged members of society. This directly contradicts the logic of supremacy, which produces inequalities that systematically harm the least advantaged and benefit those already in privileged positions. Aristotle's virtue ethics asks what character traits constitute human flourishing and what vices prevent it. Contempt for other human beings, treating them as categorically less worthy, is not a virtue by any serious account of flourishing. It is a deformation of character, a failure of the virtue of justice in giving each person their due, a failure of practical wisdom in that it substitutes prejudice for genuine perception of persons, and a failure of the basic social virtues that make community life possible. The supremacist, on an Aristotelian account, is not flourishing. They are trapped in a self-limiting mode of existence. By refusing to recognize the full humanity of others, they foreclose relationships of genuine reciprocity, mutual recognition, and friendship that Aristotle identified as central to the good life. The person who cannot see another human being clearly, who sees only a racial category or a national stereotype, has impaired their own capacity for genuine human connection. Supremacy is, among other things, a cognitive and moral disability that its holders inflict on themselves.